You have beef in your fridge right now. Maybe it's mince for tonight. Maybe a steak thawing on the counter, or a pack of patties waiting for the weekend. It has been there so many times you stop noticing it. It has been part of your life since before you could read a menu, before you could have chosen it, or refused it, or asked where it came from. Here's the thing you've never stopped to ask. Not where the beef comes from, you know that, but where the right to raise that much cattle, on that much land, actually came from. Somewhere, a decision was made that dense, ancient forest should become that patty in your hand, instead of what it already was. $3 per acre. That's the number I kept returning to. $3 to flatten intact native forest, using 2 bulldozers dragging a 10-ton naval anchor chain between them. Over 1,000 hectares a day, every day, for years. And the more I sat with that number, the more the beef I'd been eating my whole life started to feel different in my hand. I wasn't the only one who noticed, not even close. When I started asking around, I found the same quiet unease everywhere, not from historians. From ordinary people, mid-conversation, half remembering something about the land being cleared for cattle, somewhere, sometime, and never quite following up. Nobody teaches this in school. Nobody puts it on the package. You can walk into a supermarket, pick up a tray of mince, and nothing on it will tell you it came from a forest that no longer exists. So here's the question that sat underneath all of it. How did something this large become this ordinary, when nobody ever explained why it was necessary in the first place? Here's what we've always been told. Government land was sitting idle, and clearing it let ordinary families finally farm it. Cheap loans, new roads, modern machines, turning wasteland into working farms. Official land sale notices called it exactly that. Underdeveloped country, going to waste under dense tree cover when it could be feeding people. Loans up to $60,000 were offered to settlers, specifically to fund the tree pulling, the burning, and the pasture that would replace it. Over 1,000 kilometers of new roads were built to move the resulting cattle to export markets. And I want to be honest with you, that explanation isn't nothing. It's not a lie built from nowhere. Droughts had hit the region hard, decades earlier. The scrub genuinely resisted early attempts to farm it. It grew back into dense thickets almost as fast as settlers could clear it by hand. Real agronomists did real mapping work. Serious people built this case from genuine evidence, and they believed it. It accounts for almost everything. Almost. Here's what it doesn't account for. The government's own sales materials promised these cleared soils would support farming indefinitely. The documented record shows something else. What looked like fertility in the first years wasn't the soil itself, it was the ash bed left behind from burning the timber. Once that thin layer of nutrients washed away, the decline was measurable and fast. Within 20 years of clearing, cropped land in this scheme lost 46% of its soil carbon and 55% of its nitrogen. Wheat yields fell by more than 60%. Pasture grass, available to cattle the entire stated point of the scheme, halved within 3 years of clearing. That's not a slow decline anyone could have missed. That's a documented collapse on land sold as permanently productive, which means the beef you eat, the ordinary thing that feels like it was always just there, sits in that gap between what people were told and what the record actually shows happened to the ground it stands on. And then I found where they tested it first. Before this scheme covered 4.5 million hectares, it covered 8,888 acres at a single research station near a town called Theodore, built in 1962 for $591,500. This was the trial site, the place where the government worked out exactly how to do this at scale before doing it everywhere else. At Theodore, they tried a tree crusher first. It worked, at $6 an acre. Then they tried something cheaper, 2 bulldozers, chained together, dragging that anchor chain across the ground. Same result, half the price. That method, the one that produced the number I opened with, was chosen at Theodore, and then repeated across the entire basin. They also tested what would grow back afterward. Aerial spraying of a defoliant, twice, 10 to 12 months apart. to stop the native forest from regrowing. And they planted the replacement, acre by measured acre, 1,153 acres of Rhodes grass, 517 acres of buffalo grass, imported from Africa, 246 acres of green panic, plus imported legumes. Every part of what would eventually cover 4.5 million hectares was tested here first, at a scale you could walk across in an afternoon. One trial site, one documented method. Rolled out, almost unchanged, across a landscape the size of a small country. The station cost $591,500 to build. A third of that went into administrative buildings, a laboratory, and staff housing. Another chunk went into 67 miles of fencing, carving the property into 77 separate experimental paddocks, a dam holding 16 million gallons of water. All of it built to answer one question: what is the cheapest, fastest way to remove a forest and keep it from growing back? And once you have Theodore, the rest of the record opens outward. In the wider Fitzroy River Basin, the full area this scheme covered annual water runoff nearly doubled once the forest came off the land. Under intact forest, about 5% of rainfall ran off the surface. Under crops, that number rose to 11%. Under grazed pasture, 9%. On pasture land specifically, peak runoff rates rose by 166%. Sediment washing off the cleared land increased by up to 6.45 times the baseline rate recorded under undisturbed forest. That sediment didn't stop at the paddock fence. It traveled downstream, into a river system that empties into the Great Barrier Reef Lagoon, turning this one scheme into one of the largest single sources of fine sediment reaching the reef. A fact confirmed by long-term hydrological monitoring, not by the government report that promised the opposite. Different measurement, same gap. The system that was supposed to stabilize the water made it worse, at a scale far beyond the paddocks it was applied to. Somewhere else in the same record, the promise wasn't about soil or water, it was about choice. Government announcements describe this as a voluntary opportunity, settlers bidding at public auction, free to build the farm they wanted. But the leases themselves, under the 1962 Act, contained mandatory clearing covenants. A settler who didn't clear a specified acreage within a fixed number of years wasn't gently discouraged. Their lease was forfeited back to the Crown. The voluntary farmer was, on paper, a tenant with a deadline. Further out again, in a sub-region called Arcadia Valley, the official design maps had promised something else: timber reserves, environmental buffers, a balanced approach to development. What actually happened there was close to total. 80,000 hectares of dense, semi-evergreen forest thicket, cleared to nearly nothing by the time anyone surveyed what was left. Not a balance. An almost complete removal in the one place the plan said would be protected. 4 places, 4 different kinds of evidence: soil, water, law, forest. The same specific thing missing from the record every time, what the plan promised, and what actually happened once the machines started moving. This is not the shape of coincidence. Coincidence scatters, this clusters. And beef sits in every one of those places, not as a metaphor, as the actual, stated reason the land was cleared. The station at Theodore existed to figure out how to turn forest into cattle country. The wider basin was cleared to carry a minimum of 1,000 head per holding. Arcadia Valley was cleared for the same purpose as everywhere else. You were not handed something local. You were handed the output of a single method, applied without real variation across an area larger than most countries. Here's what the official explanation requires you to accept, not as a conspiracy, as arithmetic. One government program, 4.5 million hectares, 14 years, start to finish. One clearing method, 2 bulldozers, 1 anchor chain, $3 an acre, tested on 8,888 acres at a single research station, then repeated without significant variation across an area roughly 70% of the entire Fitzroy River Basin. Over 1,000 hectares removed per day at the operation's peak, using paper survey maps drafted by hand between February and October, radio contact between clearing crews, and diesel. No satellite tracking, no digital land registry, no modern logistics software to coordinate contractors across a landscape larger than Switzerland. And by 1984, less than 0.5% of the original 6 million hectares of that forest remained in any protected form, 30,000 hectares out of 6 million. I am not saying this was a secret. It wasn't. It was announced in Parliament. But the official explanation has never been required to account for how completely and how fast one government apparatus reshaped a landscape that size. And it has never had to explain why the ecological cost was absent from every promise made to the people who were sent to clear it. Beef is the product of that arithmetic. Whatever it looked like from inside government offices in the 1960s, you are holding the output of a 14-year operation that converted a forest the size of a small nation, using a method worked out on one trial plot, at a speed the coordination tools of the era shouldn't have made possible. If you've made it this far, you already know something most people watching this channel don't. Subscribe if you want to see where the next thread leads, because I'm not done pulling on this one. The man behind the map was named Percy Skirman. In 1948, as a young government agricultural officer, he traveled across central Queensland, compiling the first detailed land use survey of the region. He was doing his job, measuring soil, marking boundaries, noting where the scrub grew thickest. His mapping identified 11.2 million acres as suitable for agricultural conversion. That map became the scientific foundation for everything that followed the trial at Theodore, the anchor chains, the 14 years of clearing. Skirman went on to a respected career in Queensland agriculture. The record does not show him operating a bulldozer or defending the scheme in Parliament. It shows a man who measured land, wrote down what he found, and moved on to the next survey. They were not making the decision to clear 4.5 million hectares. They were doing their job. And that job, done exactly as it was designed, produced a map that made everything after it possible. Skirman did not know what his survey would become. The record does not show that anyone told him. That is either ordinary bureaucracy or the most important detail in this entire investigation. The record cannot tell us which. I want to be honest with you about what I cannot prove, not as a disclaimer, as the most important thing I can say. I cannot prove that anyone involved understood the scale of the ecological cost before it happened. I cannot prove whether the outcome, a landscape converted almost completely, with barely 0.5% set aside, was the plan from the start, or something that emerged one clearing contract at a time, decision by ordinary decision. I cannot prove what would have happened if the Theodore trials had shown the ecological cost early enough to change the program, because the record doesn't show anyone asking that question at the time. And I cannot prove that beef, specifically, was ever meant to carry this history. That connection is real, and it's documented: the roads, the loans, the 1,000-head minimum, but it's mine to draw, not something the record states outright. I'm also aware that I've been looking at this pattern for a while now. Minds that look for patterns find them. I'm not exempt from that. What I'm asking you to do isn't to trust my instinct for it. I'm asking you to look at the 4 documented cases I've shown you: the soil, the water, the leases, the forest, and ask yourself whether the official explanation accounts for all 4. It does not account for all 4. That's not my conclusion. That's the gap. Every one of those 4 cases comes from inside the same scheme, the same 14 years. I'm not claiming this happened the same way somewhere else. I'm claiming the official record of this one place doesn't hold together on its own terms. There is one thing the record preserved that connects the beef on your plate to everything I've just shown you. It's called the Brigalow Catchment Study, a 45-hectare research site near Theodore, still running today, over 60 years after it started. It holds 3 side-by-side plots of land, deliberately kept apart for comparison. One, 16.8 hectares, left as untouched virgin forest, exactly as it stood before 1962. One, 11.7 hectares, cleared for continuous cropping. One, 12.7 hectares, cleared for grazing cattle pasture, sitting a fence line away from the forest it was carved out of. It's maintained by the Queensland Government's Environment Department, and it has been collecting data without interruption since 1965, 17 years of measurement before the site was even cleared. And every year since. It exists, it's accessible. It didn't survive because someone decided to protect the truth. It survived because it was built as a working research site, and nobody ever needed to erase a working research site. The untouched forest plot was simply left standing next to the thing that replaced it, and both have been measured, side by side, for 60 years. Beef is in your fridge right now. It was there before you watch this. It'll be there after. Nothing about it has changed. Same weight, same shrink wrap, same shelf. What's changed is what you know about the 14-year window it came from. About Percy Skirman, mapping soil in 1948 with no way of knowing what it would become. About the 14 years and 4.5 million hectares that the official record has never quite been asked to explain in full. The beef was not cleared for you. It was cleared about the land, and about a decision that a forest was worth less than what could replace it. That decision had a category for the cattle it was designed to produce, and a category for the settlers it was designed to relocate, and no category at all for what you'd eventually ask, watching a video decades later, holding the same kind of package in your hand. The Brigalow catchment study remains, 3 plots wide, still measured every season, and if you look at it long enough, it tells you exactly how something becomes ordinary, not through familiarity. Through the completely ordinary act of no one ever explaining why it was necessary in the first place. Beef has been in your life since before you could read. You've never been asked whether you wanted the land it came from cleared this way. You've never been told what it replaced. What would you do differently if you had been